Oh, no, wait. I do have YouTube open. So.
Well, and you can just like answer comments on the side. It's really nice when you're hosting it because you don't have to worry about it.
It's true. It is superior for that reason.
Okay, there we go.
Oops, maybe
I was just surprised by my own voice because I did not remember to mute it.
Always a fun surprise.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll let people trickle in, but welcome. Hi. I'm very excited for this one. I can't remember, like, before this one, which of our live shows was like the most delayed after we were like supposed to have it, you know?
Maybe, I'm trying to think. Maybe The Three Musketeers?
I was going to say, I know
Maybe.
we did that one in January, but it was a December book.
Yeah, probably because it was so long and a major slog.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I pushed myself through to finish that in December. I'm like, I'm not carrying this into the new year. I just won't.
Yeah, I should have followed that. Hi, Nina. You're here. Yay. But yeah, after like a minute or so, we'll go into the usual like opening spiel. I guess we can do that easy stuff first, like the little introductions. So yeah, I want to keep with Kara your thing of like introduce yourself, but most people who watch this are familiar with us. So give us a book recommendation that you enjoyed recently, because that was a nice surprise. I liked doing that. So
good.
And I guess since I was just talking about you, Kara, you can go ahead first.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. I'm sure most of you have heard my little intro, so you know that I read all over the place. That's very important to me. Probably most vocal about middle grade because I feel like that's the underdog. But yeah, I read a wide variety of things, and I'm going to mention the book that I am kicking myself for not mentioning for the live show I hosted, because I just forgot to do my own recommendation. I don't know how that happened. But Little Thieves by Margaret Owen is incredible. It's a dark Goose Girl retelling where you're following the maid character, which if you know anything about the Goose Girl fairy tale, that's like kind of an unusual choice. There's a few authors who have done it, but not that many. And she's the adopted goddaughter of Death and Fortune, which is super cool. The world is inspired. Yeah, it's very cool. The world is inspired by like German folklore. And like the world building is great. The main characters are great. Both leads are also demisexual, which is super cool. The romance subplot is like top tier. The plot's really interesting. Yeah, like the book starts out with Vanya, our main character, like she has taken the place of the princess and she's using this opportunity to steal from a bunch of rich people. And then this like inspector shows up who's like, hey, why are all these jewels going missing? And she's like, I don't know. Not sure. And then there's like all this going on because she's trying to raise enough money to like get away from her godmother's influence because it's not entirely comfortable, you know, being at the beck and call of Death and Fortune. So she's trying to do that. And then she realizes that to make things even more complicated, she might actually have to go through with the marriage to the princess's horrible, horrible fiance. So there's a lot going on. Great character work. The writing is amazing. The folklore elements are great. And I feel like Vanya is a character type that a lot of authors think they can do and can't. So yeah, just I really love that book. Yeah. And I think it's the first in the series, but it definitely like wraps up its own story arc. So you won't feel like, I think you'll be interested in the next book, but it's definitely like a complete story. So yes, love that book. Also, thank you, Nana. You're so sweet.
Yes, I wanted to not interrupt you, but I did want to share her comment because she's right to say it. Taylor, take it away.
So if you can tell, I was quickly going through my audiobook recommendations, but I will say my general intro. So hi, I'm Taylor from Page Screen Taylor. I read a lot. I read across the board as well, but I mostly lean towards YA. No, actually, I don't lean towards YA anymore. Oh my gosh. Romance, adult fantasy and sci-fi, and classics now. And the occasional nonfiction book if it's on audiobook, because I can't physically read one for the life of me. And I've been through a major reading slump recently, so outside of the Past It Classics books, I haven't really been reading much. I will say that I'm about halfway through Watchmen. Um, and if I could remember the author's name, I would let you know. I'll look that up. Um, but it's a graphic novel about these sort of superheroes in the Reagan era. First in the 1950s, and then in the Reagan era. And one of the superheroes was just murdered. And it's like really interesting. It has all of these superheroes, but there's a lot of criticism of the Vietnam War and Reaganism, and it criticizes the idea of like political correctness is bad, which is really interesting. And the writer is Alan Moore, and the artist is Dave Gibbons, and the colorist is John Higgins. And I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really liking it so far.
Nice. And I'm Julia. This is my channel that we're on. So, hopefully people know me here. But I, again, read pretty widely. I have been like rediscovering my love of YA fantasy the last couple months. So
there's some good ones that are coming
right
out
now.
Yeah.
Kara, you're aware that I'm reading Graceling right now. What a time to be alive.
Yeah.
And for my actual recommendation, it will be unsurprising to people who follow me on social media because I haven't shut up about them. But I recommend everyone to read The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White, and the subsequent books, unless you're Kara, but that's okay.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm like obsessed with them. At this point, I just want to know like everyone in my life, like who I've convinced to read a Kirsten White book, because I would love to know that information. I feel like I've had a good track record with this. So yeah, they're so good. It's like Arthurian legend retellings, and it's delightful. Yeah. I don't even want to say anything about it because like the very first plot twist comes like the first or second chapter, and you're like, okay, we're in for a ride. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, let me open up my notes and do a little check. Intro's done. Okay. So in November, we read Olivia by Dorothy Strachey. And before we go into this, we want to cover them, but I love that. Yeah, we'll go over like trigger warnings. Wait, I just need to say. Exactly.
My boy.
We love him. Yeah, and Taylor too. You both are supporting Mordred without even being aware of it. So love that. Okay, so on a serious note, sorry, the like trigger warnings that come up in this book, and a few of them will definitely come up in conversation. Some of them very less likely. So definitely going to come up at some point are grief, overdose, possible suicide, possible murder, pedophilia, and generally questionable behavior towards minors. And then things that come up in the book that I don't have any discussion points for, but maybe will be mentioned, are anti-Semitism and Orientalism. So we've got all that fun ahead. Yay. But let's just start with our general kind of like, what was your familiarity with this story and author before going into it, and then also your rating. So Taylor, you can take it away this time.
Okay, well, my history with both the story and author is absolutely nothing. I knew nothing. I never heard of the book. I had never heard of the author. I did a little research on Dorothy Strachey, who was also, her last name was also Dorothy Bussey. Mm-hmm. And she was part of the Bloomsbury group, which I was familiar with. So like E.M. Forster, Virginia Woolf, all those fun people. But I had never really heard of her before. As for my rating, I am sort of floating between like 3.5 and maybe 4 stars. I think I like this book. I think. I have a lot of like feelings about it that I'm hoping, as usual, our discussion will sort of help me sort through.
Very true. Kara, how about you?
Well, like Taylor, I had absolutely no experience or knowledge of this story or author. I had never heard of her or this book before, Julia, you picked it. So it was really interesting, like, oh, wow, this is we had read The Children's Hour, which was a time. So I was like, hopefully this is a lesbian classic that will be better. Which I have mixed feelings on that.
Yeah.
I gave it a 3-star because like it's beautifully written. I think the writing style would have annoyed me if the book were longer, but in a small dose, I liked it. I really liked some of the things it said, like thematically about like love and beauty and kind of figuring out who you are as a person. I was not super impressed by the character work, especially considering what an introspective story it was. I don't feel like we got to know anyone super well. And my biggest thing is like, I was not a fan of the romanticizing of essentially pedophilia, is how I feel like it read. There was a while where I was hoping like, oh, maybe it's going to be like a one-sided crush thing, kind of romantic awakening. Like somebody had the thing for their teacher and we never really know how the teacher feels about it. And that's not to get into spoilers, but like, it's not exactly what happens. So yeah, like I like Taylor, I have very conflicting feelings about it, but I'm definitely glad I read it. Like I had no idea about this and like, it's a really interesting story.
Yeah. I liked it better than both of you guys, but we'll get to that in a second. It's funny because I'm the one who picked this book and I like had it on my Goodreads TBR for a while, but I cannot remember for the life of me like where I heard of it or like who recommended it in some like random video or something. Like somehow it came on my radar and I was like, I'm intrigued. I want to read it. So that's like why I had picked it. So yeah, and Taylor, I know you and I have the same edition, so I don't know if you read either of the 2 introductions. I forgot to ask you guys about this, and it's not required reading, so it's okay if you didn't.
I did
Kara,
not.
I don't know if yours had any introductions, because there's one actually from the author herself, and then the other in our edition is by Andre, I'm going to mess up how you say his name, like Aseman, who is the author of Call Me By Your Name, which is why I asked you guys about that earlier.
Oh, that was the author.
Yes.
Okay,
That makes
I
a
did
little more
read this.
sense.
I did read this introduction. It was one of those where like I couldn't tell until partway through if it was like a meta thing that the main character was doing an introduction or yeah. Well, I read something called Introduction. So
yeah. Okay, so that's probably the one by the author then.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I bring that up is because I had no clue before going into this that this book is literally like the direct inspiration for Call Me By Your Name, which is why I was asking you guys about it. And hearing it, it made complete sense to me. I'm like, the boy's name is Oliver. Oh my God. Like it's exactly the same. So that was awakening. But ironically, I tried to read that book and DNF'd it because I hated it. And I was so sick. Or no, wait. No, is he Oliver? Who's Timothy Chalamet? Is he Elio? He's Elio. The other guy's Oliver. Okay, he switched the names, but someone's Oliver. But the whole time I was like so sick of like reading how horny this teenage boy is. Like that's everything he was saying. It like wasn't like romanticized longing. It was like sexual longing. And I'm like, feel that all you want. I just can't read it for paragraphs on end. Like I'm tired. And it had no chapters. And I hate books with no chapters. So.
The worst.
Wait, there were no chapters?
No, Call Me By Your Name has like occasional like page breaks, no numbered chapters. And
that's always like an author who thinks they're way better than they are, in my opinion.
And let me tell you, your book could be 20 pages. If it has no chapters, I'm going to read it slower than a 300-page book with like 2-page chapters. Like that's just a fact.
Yep.
I don't know why it is. And yes, exactly, Nana. And that is, we're going to get to my opinion on this too. I think that book romanticizes it a lot more than this one, in my opinion, but we'll duke it out later. Don't worry. But overall, like the writing itself and like I tabbed the heck out of this. I don't know if you guys can tell from like the pastel color and how thin this book is. I saved a lot of things. So I gave it 4.4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Obviously there's like problematic elements that I'm not going to be like, I thought that was fine. There were things I did not think were fine. But like as an overarching story, like the themes and the writing, I really enjoyed. So yeah, so I talked about the connection to Call Me by Your Name. That's really all I wanted to say about that. Also, we already had a quick allusion to the Children's Hour, which it was interesting. I don't know. I guess I didn't phrase this as a question in my notes, but I'm curious, like, how similar do you think they were?
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about a lot while reading this. And it's weird because I gave the Children's Hour a lower rating, but I have much more positive feelings about reading it. Like, I think it was better written, and I actually cared about the characters. And in Olivia, I really didn't care about anybody because I don't feel like they were written super well. And it was also interesting because, like, the Children's Hour had some very problematic tropes, especially at the ending, which we talked about a lot. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that Olivia didn't do that. But one of the things that the Children's Hour did right is they didn't do the like evil lesbians preying on children thing. And this book, I feel like, really leaned into that, but tried to make it like a love story. So I don't feel like that's like a coherent answer. It was like I was thinking about that a lot. And I feel like both of these would make really great like discussion pieces in like a like theater or literature class. Yes. And you could compare it to like how we talk about these things today. So I feel like they each had things they did really badly and then like really well. So that's my take.
That's fair.
Yeah. I'm kind of in the same vein as you, Kara, although I think my feelings for the Children's Hour are probably a little more sour just because they did go with the like tragic gay suicide at the end, which as far as we know, that's kind of iffy, but for the most part it doesn't happen with our two leads. And I think it's more like the ambiguity of Miss Julie, and like I think she was shady, but that is up for discussion, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I do like the idea of having a similar setup with like a boarding school. It's all girls, but it's from the perspective of the students. And there also seems to be just a lot of not playing, but like experimenting with sexuality and gender, not just with Olivia and Miss Julie, or Mademoiselle Julie, but also with like the students, like during the
dance scene,
Mardi Gras scene where you had female students dressed up as men and like dancing with each other and so on. Which I also thought was something that, like, the sort of, like, experimentation and, like, falling in love and so on wasn't really outlined in the Children's Hour, which I think, especially, like, Olivia's journey through, like, discovering her sort of sexuality, I thought was interesting.
Well, and this one is, like, this is from the student's perspective, and Children's Hour is about the teachers, which is really interesting. And like the only reason the students are even involved in the Children's Hour is because one of them starts this rumor. You know, it's not like a story about the teachers and the students, whereas this one is, which is interesting.
And it's also interesting in terms of like what's at stake for each of the characters, which, you know, with the adulty of adult consequences and with the children, it's more like there aren't as many consequences, I guess, but obviously the time period is you know, sorry, that thought was not clear. I was just sort of going with it as it was rolling out.
No, I love it. That's
how we do it here.
You both had more to say about that than I thought. So I was like, okay, great. They've got opinions. Even if they just end kind of on like half of my thoughts too. So that's great. I did want to share, because there was this one quote. I was like going through all of my tabs like before this to be like, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that. And I had saved this one quote as like it really made me think of the Children's Hour in this moment. And it's about halfway through, and it's after Signorina, the Italian teacher, like kind of tells Olivia about the history between Mademoiselle Julie and, for differentiation's sake, let's call her Cara. Mademoiselle Cara. things don't get confusing. But just like in her narration, Olivia says, and then my thoughts went back to that past when they had both been young, both beautiful, both happy. Like a wedded couple, I thought. And when couples who have loved part, what a tragedy is that? What disillusionment, what self-reproach, what regrets were eating my beloved's heart out. Like, but just that beginning bit of it, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds like how they were in the children's hour before her like boy comes along. So I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, more related texts I want to talk about because like my brain was going everywhere reading this. I was like, this is like this, that is like that. Like, and I love that. Like, yeah. So I think that's another thing that got me jazzed about it is like the 500 references to Shakespeare she made in a 200-page book. Like at the costume party, one of her friends was dressed up as Puck, and I was like, this girl.
I love that. That scene was my favorite, I think. That it was so interesting.
I know. That's the thing is like, I enjoy the story for what it was, but if this story was also just like about her and her group of friends and like their shenanigans, I would read another 400 pages of that. Like I thought they were like really interesting, even though we got like little glimpses of them. But so I wanted to talk about 12th Night.
Ooh.
Because, I mean, 12th Night has a character named Olivia, who is very clear-coded because she falls in love with a woman disguised as a man. So, like, my brain was already rolling. And then there are so many moments in the language where I'm like, Olivia, it's Olivia. Like, I really think that Dorothy was, like, a big 12th Night fan because she has, I'm literally just going to, like, go through, she talks about, like, scorn, which is a word that you hear a lot in 12th Night in regards to like the relationship between Viola and Olivia. She has this part where she's like, who can describe a face? Descriptions resolve themselves into an inventory of items. An item, a rather broad face, a low forehead. And like Olivia literally does this in 12th Night.
Yeah.
Where she's like, oh, I won't be so hard-hearted to not leave my beauty behind. I'll leave an inventory. 2 gray eyes, 2 lips.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
There's more. I got to keep going. This is just like a rant. This isn't even a question for you guys.
Julia's like, welcome to my TED Talk on 12th Night.
Yeah, buckle up for the next 6 minutes because it's just going to be 12th Night.
I love it.
There's a quote where she says, veil after veil was slowly lifting from life. And I'm like, Olivia, where's the veil? And then she lets Viola see her face. Like, about which one is this? Not really that one. Is this the one about pity? Oh, jealousy. In the bottom of her heart lay jealousy, and Olivia says she has a jealous heart in 12th Night. And then also Olivia says she has nothing now in her heart but the very purity of pity. And in 12th Night, when Viola's like, no, I don't love you, I pity you, she's like, that's a degree to love. Like, so there were just so many like really on the nose moments. And this is like my headcanon. I can't ask Dorothy like, hey, were you really inspired by 12th Night? But I fully believe that she was. And I just wanted to put that out there in the world. So thank you for listening.
Oh. Thank you for bringing that up. I hadn't even thought of that.
Me too.
I was like, oh, we're probably going to talk about the children's hour, so I will block every other thing I've ever read out of my head. But that was honestly really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to have an excuse to write an essay because that would be my thesis. But yeah, no one's got the time and energy for that right now. But yeah. I also mentioned to you guys earlier about Spring Awakening. It's not really worth delving into, but I guess like anything that deals with like burgeoning like sexuality in like young characters, like that's always what it makes me think of. And I'm like, oh, you feel so repressed. You're like, is this normal? Am I crazy? Like, it's just the same vibes. So I guess if you like that theme, there's a recommendation for you, but I don't have any more in-depth thoughts. Okay. Now what I think you've both been kind of waiting for, or definitely Kara, you have, let's talk about characters a little bit. I want to specifically talk about Olivia, of course, and Mademoiselle Julie, but then just open up the floor to like, is there anyone else you want to talk about? Because those are the only two I have like any feelings on, because everyone else is like pretty minor. It's such a short book. But Olivia, what do we think of her?
I kind of thought she was interesting. I really liked reading from her perspective, like I said earlier, sort of her burgeoning sexuality and realizing that she was in love with Miss Julie. And I liked how her thoughts felt almost like a teenager's, like, oh, maybe she means this or maybe she means that. And if Miss Julie or Mademoiselle Julie wasn't,
You can call her whatever you want. I don't care. Just call her Julie.
yeah, Julie, if Julie wasn't so sus in terms of like how she felt towards Olivia, I think like it would come across as so charming, like, oh my god, she said like she liked my essay. Oh,
Right.
It's like, oh my god, like it felt like how a teenager thinks when they have a crush like this with someone who is unattainable and they're reading all of these little things into it, which I thought was really interesting. And I also like how sometimes she could be like judgmental and like a little bit mean in her thoughts. It all felt very much like this is a 16-year-old girl trying to figure out like who she is and where she belongs in the world. And, you know, she's also sort of like jealous of other girls, but also she has these good friends and so on. I don't know. I liked Olivia at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'll jump in here because I think Kara's going to be the dissenting opinion. I also really liked Olivia. I like every other sentence she said. I was like, oh my god, high school me. It's high school me. I'm sitting in embarrassment. Yeah, like all of it. Like the overthinking everything your crush does. Like it felt so genuine to like a teenager who's like, is this love? And it's like, no, probably not, honey. But like, I appreciate your hormones are working overtime, you know, like. So I liked that aspect of her. I mean, yeah, I think she felt balanced to me. Like you were saying, Taylor, like how sometimes she was like thinking like, I hate this person. I don't even know them, but they suck, you know, like I don't want to meet this girl. But then, you know, she would like come around and be like, oh, okay, whatever. You're just a person too. So I liked Olivia. I mean, there's not that much to work with, you know, it's only so much of a little novella, but like I enjoyed her character for what she is, like as a, I guess an archetype you could say, like it's like a lovesick teenage girl, but then with the spin of but make it lesbian. So. But Kara, go ahead.
Yeah, so I liked some of the things. Like I also found some of what Olivia's thought processes were like very relatable, and some of the things that happened around her were interesting, but I just don't feel like for a book where we're in her head the entire time, like it's a short book, but it is very, very like internal. And I feel like it's weird that it's so internal and yet I have no idea who Olivia is. Like I know who she likes, and like we get these long tracts about like philosophy and beauty and life and art, which like I loved some of that. But this book just read like a writing exercise to me, honestly, because it was just like pretty words and like one or two dramatic things happening and everybody like thinking about them. Which like I love character focused stuff, but I don't think for me, Olivia was, I don't think we got enough about her like other opinions and other interests, which I get that like it's an obsessive love story. Like I understand why that would happen, but it's hard for me to attach to a character when the character is fixated on one thing that I don't particularly care about, because I didn't like Mademoiselle Julie. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I liked some of the things Olivia said. I mentioned earlier that like some of the themes about, you know, love and like especially first love and yeah, like the embarrassment when you're like overanalyzing everything someone does. Like I think she was very relatable in some ways, but I don't think I don't think I had enough information about her to have feelings about her one way or the other. I was like, you're fine. I guess you're here.
I guess this book is named after you. I don't know.
Yeah, like it's just very odd to me that the book is named after her and we're in her head the entire time. And it's like, I have no idea who you are as a person, which could also be, I mean, she's at an age where that's kind of like you're figuring out who you are. But yeah it's interesting because in contrast to Sunlight on a Broken Column, which we just read, where like we also have a female main character who's kind of figuring herself out. I feel like Layla, I don't know, for whatever reason, it felt like, yes, relatable, but also we got personality to her. And whereas Olivia, I didn't get that as much. And again, this is very short, so maybe I'm not being fair, but.
I was going to say too, like not even in the length of the book, but maybe because we got more of Layla like over time and like her more figuring out who she was. Whereas this is just like her in that little pocket of time going through those feelings. And then it's like, and this is what happened in the end. Okay, bye.
Yeah, which was nothing.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I kind of got a sense of like what she liked and so on. Like we know that she's very smart and takes to studies very well. But I also remember when I was 16, I didn't really have any hobbies that didn't have to do with school or getting into college. I was like, what do I like? Whatever gets me into college.
Yeah.
What looks best on an application? That's what I like.
Yeah.
Or maybe I did it because it would get me into a good college and then I just so happened to like it. Like I played golf in high school, but I ended up liking it. But I was like, this will get me into Harvard.
Yeah.
And I suppose like, especially back in the day, it was probably a lot more like, okay, well, here are like these skills that we expect you to have. And it's like, what would her hobby be? Like needlepoint? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
I guess it's not even so much like hobbies or interests. It's like her feelings about other characters that was missing for me.
Yeah.
And this is another thing where like, the premise of the book is that she's like obsessed with Julie. So that's like not surprising, but yeah, it just felt like, I think it felt repetitive. Maybe that's the problem, is that we knew like 3 things about Olivia and we just got those 3 things over and over and over. And even though the story was short, it still felt like a lot of time spent on nothing.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely see what you mean. And it would be nice to see maybe a little bit more of her friendships too.
Yeah. There's a couple of them who were interesting.
And something I did find interesting about Olivia was that she was an atheist at a time when, like, obviously there were atheists around and there have been atheists throughout history, but I did think that was an interesting aspect of her. And I think it did come up a couple of times throughout the story, but I think it would have been interesting to see her contemplate that a little bit more.
Yeah, it was almost like in those little like brief beginning chapters, like we started to get a sense of who she was, and then once she met Mademoiselle Julie, she was like, all right,
this is my whole personality.
This is it. Like,
which to be fair
was intentional. I don't know, but
like that's what happens sometimes when you
I went to like 3 football games because the guy I liked in high school played in the marching band drum line. So I went so I can just go to halftime. Yeah. But I stayed for the entire game so I could maybe see him after the game.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes that's just being a teenager. I hate football.
I went to football games to see a guy I liked on the football team not even always play football. Like sometimes he was just there on the side. I was like, look at you in those football pants. All right. Glad to be here. That's it. So, yeah, mood. Okay, well, let's kind of take a downer turn here and talk about Julie because she's interesting. And yeah, I don't know. She's a character who like confuses me, but I don't like actively hate, but I definitely don't actively like. So I'm just like, what are you, you know? So who's got thoughts?
I definitely have thoughts. This is one of those cases where like one of the things that I kept thinking about, because I looked at reviews after I read this and I was very surprised that not a lot of people mentioned, like, it seems like an understatement to even call it problematic because it's like she's kind of a sex offender possibly, like but she speaks French, so it's classy. It's fine.
Yeah.
So I was really surprised that, like, I don't know if I came across, maybe there's one review that I saw, and I didn't read like every single review, but like I was just scrolling through the top ones on Goodreads, and I was not seeing a lot of people mention it, which I was surprised about. And it's one of those things where, like, while I was reading the book, I kept thinking, after we got to the point where I keep interrupting myself. Let me start over. I have so many thoughts about Julie that they're all just like fighting. It was like halfway through the book where I was still kind of hopeful. I'm like, okay, this is like a one-sided thing at this point. I think this is interesting. Maybe that's kind of what the focus is going to be. And I was like, okay, I can get on board with that. It's like, I think a lot of people, not everyone, but I think a lot of people had some kind of like at least short-lived like crush on like an authority figure, you know, like a teacher. It's like I think a lot of people had that teacher that was like kind of cute, and like you never actually thought anything was going to happen, but it was like interesting, you know? So I was like, all right, I'm okay with that. And then like things start happening that are reciprocal. And I was like, oh, I don't like this. And then after that point, one of the things that I kept thinking about was like, if this were a male teacher, nobody would be okay with this. Like some of the things that Julie said, or that we heard about from other characters about like, oh, you were always her favorite, and she always has her favorites, and she always goes to visit them at night, like last thing. And just like things where I understand that adding a gender power imbalance does like affect that. So I'm not saying it's like an exactly identical situation, but I feel like that's one of those cases where like if you can change the gender and make it like way more uncomfortable, it's like maybe it's already uncomfortable.
Like maybe
so that
you
was
need
one
to
of the
unpack that a little bit, because
yeah, and like that was one of the big things for me that was like I couldn't get past in this story, because it felt like, I don't know, like Mademoiselle Julie was like not the worst about it, but it's like I don't know if you can have like degrees of being a pedophile. Do you know what I mean? Like, so
I know.
I don't know if I have like a thesis about her. I'm just kind of like, didn't like her, uncomfortable. I was hopeful for how things were going for a while, and then I was like, oh, which this was also written at a time where like that level of nuance was not super common, so I get that. I just have a lot of complicated thoughts, but most of them are like, Julie should not be around children.
Yeah. I feel pretty similar to you, Kara. I actually went in thinking like it was going to be like a Call Me by Your Name or like love story, and on top of that, I don't know why, but the shape of this woman's lips, I was like, that's not a trustworthy woman.
Just look at her.
Look at her cheekbones, look at her lips.
Plotting.
Nope, cannot be trusted. So I already went in disliking her, and then as the book went on, I was kind of like, okay, I'm like 45 pages in. It seems to be one-sided for the most part, or like one-sided. So maybe this is just her like, you know, falling in love with her teacher and like discovering her sexuality throughout it. And then like Mademoiselle Julie started acting like sketch, and I was like, ooh, I don't know about this one, Julie. And then like that scene during the Mardi Gras thing where she kisses like Cecil's shoulder.
Kissed her bare shoulder. I was like,
Kissed her shoulder.
And that's when I was like, I'm done. I was never on the Julie Stan train, but there was no chance of me even hopping on board. I was like, this is weird.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I've never heard of any platonic shoulder kissing in my life. So yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
So that sort of turned me against her. And on top of that, like, just as soon as that happened, I sort of like flash back to like all of these scenes where she's like, she has her favorites and she has Olivia sit next to her and so on. And my first thought was like, okay, you know, some teachers take students under their wings, or like they have a teacher's pet. If you were like me and you were a nerd, sometimes you would stay in at lunch and help the teacher grade papers because you just needed to suck up for some reason.
Yeah.
But you know, everything she does comes across as like grooming.
Yeah.
So at that point I was like, yeah, maybe you should go to Canada, but don't open up a school. Just live in the wilderness amongst the moose and the bears.
Yeah.
Yeah. They won't be impacted. Just go be with the moose.
Yeah.
Join
I
a moose
know.
colony.
Moose colony.
Yeah, it was interesting because like reading the scenes where like Olivia is like up late at night wondering like, is she coming to my room? Like, is she gonna come visit me? It was a weird reading experience because like it worked in that like I was also being like, oh my God, is it happening? But hers was like excitement and mine was like dread. I was like, is she coming to your room?
Yeah.
She's not. Like, so I had like a sense of relief once there was never like like a very intimate encounter between the two of
Right.
them, but it
Yeah.
doesn't erase all of like the little like tidbits, Taylor, like you said, of like grooming and like the little, things that she would say and do. And I was just like, I'm uncomfy. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The entire time, I don't know if you know that meme of like the little boy holding a water gun and aiming it, and it just says like, "I won't hesitate, bitch." I was like, that was me the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot. Yeah. There's like,
Yeah.
because some of it is, there's like potential interpretations that are like less awful, like kind of like you were saying, Taylor, where like she at first seemed like she was just like, oh, you're a really good student, I want you to sit next to me. And even at that point, there were like, when those things were happening, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, this is really interesting because it looks like maybe we're going to get like it's going to be a story about the main character's like awakening, that where she like interpreted somebody being in love with her and like they weren't, because it kind of read like Julie could have been totally unaware of what she was doing because like her actions were not outright like creepy,
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of that where it was like there was a potential that was more innocent. And then yeah, after like the shoulder kiss and like a couple other things, like even from the point where like she was just coming to say like good night like in her room or something, it was like even that, which I think happened before the Mardi Gras party, as soon as that started happening I was like, oh okay, yeah, like you know what's going on. Yeah, it's just
Part of it too is also sort of parsing out like what was normal for teachers to do at the time versus what we consider normal for teachers to do now. Because I remember my mom saying when she was in elementary school in like the 70s, teachers would give you cough medicine if you had like a cold. And like now teachers aren't going to do that. That's weird.
Yeah.
So it's also thinking about like, okay, like what were teachers like, and when does this take place? Like the 1920s?
I think even earlier.
It was like published in 49, but I don't know.
I feel like it's
it says
like really
groundbreaking classic novel about a teenage girl's infatuation with her headmistress at a boarding school in 19th century Paris, so 1800s.
Oh, this is earlier than I thought it was.
I knew it was like old, but I didn't know the exact. Yeah.
Interesting.
I thought it was like turn of the century or like just before.
Yeah.
But still, I don't know if there was ever a time period in which seeing your student in a nightgown is like acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
I think we can draw a line there.
Yeah. I think too, I was like, well, if you could like actually spank your students back then, what else can you do? But
I mean,
like,
fair point, Taylor.
Yeah.
But also like, after a while I was like, yeah, seeing your student in their nightgown and visiting them at night, like with no reason.
Yeah.
Maybe we should clarify the purpose of the spanking is important to mention. Yeah, like as punishment, it was not. In other cases,
no other kinds of spanking.
Yes, sorry, I should have specified.
Yeah, no, not that was like a thing in this book, but yeah.
Thankfully, that's one line they did not cross. This far, no further. No.
Oh my God. No, but it's interesting, like the way you guys were mentioning, like the early interactions, like, oh, maybe they were like misconstrued, but like the more I think on it, the more I'm like, how much of it was like a manipulation on Julie's part? Because there were times when she was like, oh, this essay, not up to scratch. And then so Olivia's like, oh, I need to be working harder to get her approval, like that kind of stuff. And I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, and at
Yeah.
one point she told Olivia that she wasn't pretty. She like complimented Cecil and then told Olivia like, well, you have a good like figure, which has never been appropriate for a teacher to
Yeah.
say.
No.
But she's like, you have a good figure, you have good hair, and you have a great personality. And like that sort of throws Olivia into crisis too, because
I
Yeah,
know.
she's kind of negging
she
her.
negged, I was gonna say she negged her.
Literally.
Yeah.
Like, thanks for complimenting everything except my face.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that you said that, Taylor, because it really is something where, like, not only once you realize what Julie's doing, like her earlier actions become like a lot less less open to interpretation. It's like, oh, okay, like that's actually what was going on. But it's also like makes you realize she did everything that she could to like lead to all of this happening, or to like encourage Olivia's feelings, but she was encouraging them in a way that's like just stepping back and letting it happen. But like she definitely, like, by having her sit next to her and by like the way that she talked to her and the way that for so long she pretended that she didn't have any idea of how Olivia felt about her. It's like all of that, like not just like, oh, it's a lot more sinister looking now, but it's like, oh, she was planning this, like you said, grooming. And yeah, and like the fact that we hear, not that it would be any more acceptable if she had only done this with Olivia, but apparently this is a pattern with her, which is like, I feel like that's another sign that it's like, yeah, this is not innocent. Like this is like she I don't know, it's almost like a hunting ground for like impressionable girls.
Yeah.
Super creepy.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting with Laura. Sorry to interrupt your thought, Taylor.
No, go ahead.
Because like Olivia specifically like asks her like, does your heart beat faster when you talk to her? Like, do you, like hold your breath waiting to hear her answer? And Laura's like, no, what?
Yeah.
And then so she's like, okay, so is my feeling more than Laura's or less than Laura's? Like, what does that mean for me? And so it's like, I don't even know how to interpret her like relationships with these other girls who she's like tried to groom in the past. Like, was it just like an attempt and a failure, or was it just like they couldn't process what was happening because like they're straight and they were like, I didn't know a woman could do this to me or whatever, like, so it's just, it's like you said, Kara, sinister.
Yeah. I wondered too about how much we're supposed to think Laura had the same thing happen to her, because I couldn't tell either if it was like when they were saying like, oh, her favorites, but like she's never had a favorite like Olivia. It's like, does that mean that she didn't actually go that far with the others, or does it mean Olivia is the first one who reciprocated? Like what does that mean? That's another like, what's the interpretation here?
Right.
Yeah.
Taylor,
and the thing that gets me, oh, sorry.
No, I was trying to be like, go back to you. So good.
No, I was just saying, like, the thing that did confuse me about this book and what sort of made me rate it lower than a 3.5, 4 star is that, like, I'm not entirely sure how the book itself feels about Julie. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Obviously not every character in the book needs to be a good person, but like, what is the author trying to tell us about Julie? Like, are we supposed to feel sorry for her? Are we supposed to root for her and Olivia? Are we supposed to like be as disgusted with her as like all three of us are? I couldn't really get like what we were supposed to come out of there thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And even like, I know that we're seeing Julie through the eyes of somebody who's in love with her, but the fact that we never get anybody with a negative opinion of Julie that we're supposed to like all of the characters who are like maybe not the biggest fan of Mademoiselle Julie are the ones that we're not supposed to like. So that's one of those things that makes me like question. It's like, are we supposed to like her? Like, I think we're kind of supposed to, like, at least the feeling I get from the book is that I don't think we're supposed to dislike her or hate her as much as we do. But I'm like wondering how much is the main character and how much is the author's intent. It's like, oh, we should see this as a great love story, and they were kept apart by circumstance, and isn't it horrible that they didn't get to be together? And it's like, well, no, it's not, because that is a grown-ass woman, like, and a kid. yeah, I don't know if I had a point there, but I'm agreeing with you, Taylor. Like, I think too, it's like how exactly are we supposed to feel about Julie? Because like, at least based on how the characters feel, it's like a very like romanticized, like even the way that she's always described, like how beautiful she is and how clever she is and how talented she is at everything. It's like the only time we hear something bad about her is from like, oh, those jealous characters who we're not supposed to like. They just don't understand.
Very true. Okay. Not to play devil's advocate here, but this is something I wrote in my notes and that I was like, this is going to be relevant to this discussion and probably impacted my rating. Because like talking about like the age gap, the power imbalance, all of that between the two of them, like I wrote, is this story really a romance? Because in my opinion, I don't interpret it as like her wanting us to think it's romantic, even though Olivia's language is romantic. So I think that's one reason I enjoyed it more, because like as I was reading it, I'm like, to her mind, of course it's love. To us, the reader, no. But again, that's like my opinion, my interpretation. But then I thought, could a story that is so reliant on the main character's like naivete and like hormonal reactions to things, like could it even be told in a less like creepy setting? Because like I can't imagine like a 27-year-old, like graduate student and like her 33-year-old professor like having this exact same plot line, just because I feel like their interpretations of things and reactions to things would be different. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Well, because even with like a grad student and their professor, like you do have that power imbalance, which isn't great, but you also have like like a couple years age difference. And by the time you're 27, I feel like you're an adult. As much as the closer I get to 27, the more I'm like, no, let's stop that.
Yeah.
But you're an adult, you're probably like established, you've got like not a house, but you've got like an apartment and a career. Like at the end of the day, like that relationship, like while I wouldn't be like go get them, you still have that sort of mutual adulthood experience, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was about to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
I was thinking just now, like this reminded me of one of my high school teachers. She was talking about how when she first started teaching, she was like only like 2 or 3 years older than the students she was teaching, because she was like right out of, well, I guess she would have been a little older than that because she went to college. But anyway, she was barely older than the students she was teaching because she taught like upperclassmen. And she was saying how it was like some kids thought they could like kind of cross the line by like flirting with her as like a joke, and how it was like really uncomfortable, and like eventually she got them to stop. But she mentioned how, even I think somebody even asked her about this. She was like, oh yeah, even if it had been like 20 years later and like I met a former student of mine, she's like, I could never, because it's just, she's like, because our relationship started in a way that was so unequal, and it just wouldn't be, like she said, like it wouldn't be ethical in her mind for her to do that. And I just was thinking about that because like, yeah, I think the age gap is definitely a thing, but is definitely like one of the major problems with that. But even if this had been set like if there was like an epilogue where Olivia and Julie met like a decade later or something, and they're both adults now, I still would not feel comfortable with that, because they would have met and started their romantic interactions when one of them was a child,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like you can't grow out of the way that your relationship started, if that makes sense. But I do definitely see what you mean, Julia. Julie. I know. Julia, about
I didn't even put sorry, I just realized my name is only my name for my last live stream. So go ahead, keep talking.
Oh, like I do think you have a good point though about like the intensity necessary for this book, but I also wonder, I'm like, the author still could have told this kind of story and just written in a way that was less glamorous. Mm-hmm. Because yeah, like I don't know. Taylor, how do you interpret it? Like, do you feel, because I know Julia, you said you feel like this maybe is not a romanticization. Like we're not supposed to necessarily agree with how Olivia views Julie and views their relationship. And I feel like kind of we are. especially with the way that things are left with the book, and like we're supposed to mourn what could have been for their romance.
I guess I should clarify my language there. I guess I can't say for sure. Like, I think that's how she wanted us to interpret it. That is how I felt. Like, I got to the ending and I was like, whew, all right, glad that's over. Like, dude, she made it out. What an emotional journey for her, not for me.
Yeah.
And so, like, that was how I felt about it. But
yeah.
Not to speak for the authorial intent. So yeah.
Well, and that's definitely fair because like I was thinking recently about like Wuthering Heights and how a lot of people, one of the reasons they hate it is because they feel like it's romanticizing the relationship between Kathy and Heathcliff. And I don't feel like that. And so it's like, obviously, yeah, like that's a huge thing that can affect how you feel about a book with a love story in it, is how you're supposed to feel about it. So I totally get that.
I feel like I'm kind of neutral on what she intended because I genuinely don't know, because the ending is played as the sort of tragic ending.
Yeah.
But like, you know, at the end, Julie is so like cold to her, and she gets so angry, and the fact that she doesn't even want to keep like the knife, it makes me think like, okay, like it was like a childhood crush, and now that she's thrown away the knife, she's thrown or not knife, the paper cutter, the dagger.
Well, that's the thing too, is like, I know she means like an envelope opener thing, but I was picturing like a knife. I'm like, what is this gift?
A dagger.
Romance. Thanks for the dagger. Okay,
the dagger's to fight her off.
Yeah.
Like the fact that she throws it away and sort of like throws away the idea of Mrs. Julie and the idea of being romantic with her, and realizing that Miss Julie was really just really mean to her at the end, which, like, to be fair, is better than what she was before. But, you know,
yeah,
like obviously that's going to mess with Olivia's mind. But then at the end she gets it back. And
yeah.
So that's sort of like what gets to me. Like, I'm not sure. One, are we supposed to see Julie's death as like tragic? Because I think that's where the book is going. Like, it's tragic and sad.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at what you're saying. I'm laughing at a memory that I'll share when you're done.
Okay. And then like at the end she does get it back, which, like, I don't know how I would interpret it, is like she'll always have fond memories of Julie, as shown by this envelope opener with her name on it.
The most random gift. Yeah.
Sorry, I did have to laugh at the scene where like Julie is giving all the other students gifts, and she's like, "Oh man, I don't know what to give you. Take this."
And I like,
okay, I feel that.
I don't know where it went. Take this.
Yeah.
God,
well, and like the fact that when it ends and like we hear that Julie like asks her through Signorina, like, oh yeah, say that I can't write to her and blah blah blah. And it's kind of, when I read that, I was interpreting that, or thinking we were supposed to interpret that as like, oh, it hurts too much for Julie to, like, you know, correspond with this person when they had this love story, and like maybe an indication that she did have romantic feelings still for Olivia, whether or not that is ethical. But like that was a sign that she did still reciprocate. But like, it just occurred to me now, I'm like, okay, this is a much like worse interpretation, but like it could also be, if she likes young girls, maybe Olivia's like too old for her now.
Oh no, that is worse.
I know, I'm sorry, but like that, it just like occurred to me all of a sudden. I was like, oh.
See, my brain did so much better than either of those scenarios. My brain was like, she was so cold to her saying goodbye. She's like, cold turkey, out of here. Like, I know this is wrong. I gotta go to Canada. Like,
that'd be nice.
My brain did it so much nicer.
I like your interpretation a lot better.
Yeah, I also like using the phrase cold turkey.
Yeah. What, Julia?
This explains why my rating was so much higher now.
Yeah.
Like, how I do things.
I was reading this, like, I was reading this whole thing. I'm like, someone arrest Julie immediately. Get her away from these children. Like,
I won't hesitate, bitch.
Yeah.
Okay, so like the thing is too, like, having read a lot of classics and knowing how stuff like this ends, I knew Julie wasn't long for this world. Yeah, and by the end, like the last 20 minutes, I was like, when is she going to die? I'm so over her.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand her.
Okay.
And those are my thoughts.
I want to share.
Madam Julie, like.
I want to share the story, not because it's like actually in any way relatable, but the pen, what is it? The envelope. What'd she call it? The paper
Letter
cutter.
opener.
The
Yeah.
paper
Letter
cutter.
opener.
is
Thank
what
you.
Made me remind. Oh my god, I can't even talk. Made me think of it. So, in 6th grade, you guys, in 6th grade, I should not say his real name. Our like math/computer teacher was like the one like youngish male teacher at our middle school, and so everyone was like, "Ooh, you know, he's cute." But again, nothing untoward here. He was
right.
a good teacher and a married man to an adult woman, so everything was fine. But do you remember? Do you remember how big Livestrong bracelets were? Do you remember the trend? Like,
Yep.
it was a status symbol.
Yes,
like,
it was.
In the class before math that day, my Livestrong bracelet broke because I guess I was like playing with it too much. I literally came to class like teary-eyed. I was like upset that my bracelet broke. And he took his bracelet off and gave me his Livestrong bracelet. And that to me, I was like, oh my God, this bracelet is everything to me. So that's why I started laughing, because I just remembered being given a gift by a teacher and being like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And somehow he put more thought into that.
Yeah, it was way more caring. It was like, oh, you're sad. No worries. This costs $1. Take my bracelet.
Mademoiselle Julie is like the smudged writing on hand meme. It's like, I love all my students. What's it like, Cecile and all onomatopoeia. Like
onomatopoeia.
It's okay. Just before we move on, while we're talking about non-lecherous teacher gifts, at my high school we had this like thing with my academic group where the teachers would roast students and students would be assigned a teacher to roast, and you had to get them like a roast gift. So I got my English teacher because she was my favorite teacher, so I got her like something funny that had to do with Shakespeare because he was her literary crush. And she said like because me and the other student that she was assigned, she loved us so much and we were like family, so she photoshopped a picture of us into her family photo. And I kept that for years because I was like, wow.
That is amazing.
I love
it's so
that
funny
so
because
much.
The other girl who was in that photo, her arm had to be stretched so long to reach like 2 of her kids and her husband. It was so funny.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. I love that so much. Okay. Sorry, I'm like trying to be concise. We're just over the hour mark here. Oh my God, wait.
I can't believe I thought this would be a shorter live show.
I know. We have so much to talk about.
Once I said a teacher was hot in the same sentence, I said he looked like my Nana.
I am so sorry, Nana.
That is rough. That is so rough.
I read that and I was like,
yeah.
Okay. I have one more like general theme I want to talk about. I made a note about like the yearning, the pining. I feel like we've talked about that. It's something I love in general in a book. So like no matter what the context, if someone is like angst ridden over who they love, I'm like, give me, like, I love that. So that is what it is, no matter what the context is. Okay, wait. 2 more big plot things. Then I have a game, and then we'll share quotes, and we can peace out. So I wanted to talk about, like, the theme of language, right? Because there's, like, a lot of passages in French that, as a reader, I'm like, thanks, I have to translate this. Awesome, because I want to know. And, you know, she's like learning Latin, learning Italian. There's even somewhere here, let me actually find it. There is a quote that she says, oh, I should have just pulled it up on my phone. Oh, why did I do this? Where she says, the quote literally starts like words. Like, I can't find it. Sorry. Come on. This one? Nope, nope, nope. Okay, we can find it. I swear. Okay, I'm gonna look at my phone. It's gonna be faster. But so there's like lots to do with like language, and I'm gonna find the book right now, and then I'm gonna find the quote. I'm just stalling for time because I can't see my notes while I'm also looking up the quote. Okay.
Well, I could also. Oh, if you found it, then that's good.
Thank you. Okay, it goes. Oh my God, did I literally not save it in here? Oh, okay. Share your thought then, Taylor.
Back to the drawing board.
I was just going to say that this book really tested the 2 years of French I took in college. I think after a while I just gave up and I was like, bonjour, croissants. It doesn't matter.
I think I got to the point because like I wasn't having like the greatest time. Like I didn't dislike reading this book. All my thoughts are really negative, but like at the time it was fine. But I'm like, I am not invested enough to put this entire paragraph into Google Translate. I know the context of what's going on. I'm just gonna move on. Like I got it. You're fancy French. Like
yes. Fun fact
you're talking about pining.
If you get the Google app, not sponsored, I wish. They now have a feature where you can just like hold up your camera to a language and it will translate it there without you typing stuff in. And that was very handy.
Oh my God. Yeah. That would have been really handy because I would have somehow found the energy to do that.
Yeah. I like, there were several like really, really long paragraphs where I'm like, I feel like a bad reader that I'm not translating this. I'm like, but could they say anything that would change my opinion of what's going on? No. So I didn't. No. I was like, Mademoiselle Julie would still be a creep.
So we did go with the themes though. So for me, you saw how nerdy I was with like all my references to everything else. I was like, it's reflecting what's happening. Ooh. Where on earth is this quote?
Kara, what if like one of the like French lines was the thing that they could have said that would turn everything around? Like it was all Olivia talking about everything she liked.
And then Mademoiselle Julie was arrested and never seen again.
But it was in French. You were like, oh my God. Okay.
Who knows? Who knows?
We'll never know.
I know. It does bug me that I didn't do that because I'm the person who always looks stuff like that up, and I just didn't because there was too much of it and I was not invested enough.
Long ones, to be fair.
Yeah.
I finally found it. I had to look at my own dang key because dark blue is for words. So she says, every page of the Latin grammar seemed to hold some passionate secret which must be mine or I should die. Words, how astonishing they were. And like, yes, language. So my actual question with all that buildup is, why do you think that language was such a big part of this story? And do you have a favorite way that it was utilized? ?
Ooh. So I think like one of the things that first comes to mind, and when I say love language, I'm not using it in the way that we know love language, but I think this idea of like taking all of these gestures and words and sort of like decoding it and saying like this means this and this must mean that. There's this like when it comes to like romance and having a crush, there's this level of translation and oftentimes a lot of mistranslation going on into those words and actions. So I think that's kind of why language was used so much, because everyone's sort of talking around each other, and Olivia has to interpret a lot of what's going on with Julie, and even just like what's going on with the adults around her who are saying a lot of things and also just not saying them at all. If that makes sense.
No, you took the thoughts right out of my head. So I applaud you because that's what I was going to say. Kara, any thoughts or opinions on this?
Yeah. So it's funny because I didn't like articulate while I was reading it that language was a big aspect. I think the main ways I noticed it is like when Olivia or the other students are kind of talking about or using languages that are not English, it kind of felt like it was in like a superficial way. Like the fact that they were learning French, it's like obviously a status symbol, for wealthy families, for wealthy young girls, the way that like the students would either be like learning German or learning French. Like they were either a like Mademoiselle Julie girl or a Mademoiselle Cara girl. And I thought that was interesting. So it was like a way of like forming alliances. But then when it was Olivia actually like, I don't know, like using language for herself, it was like used to heighten emotion. I feel like it was used to like, it was kind of like she was telling herself like a love story about herself and Julie. And obviously she does that with like those really long French passages as well. Like when she compares them to like these famous lovers, and she's like, oh, well, she read this part during our read aloud, so it must mean that that's how she feels about me and all of that. Are you guys having camera problems too?
You look delayed to me, but I hear you just fine.
Okay, because I can't see Julia's camera at all.
Oh no! I think it's your internet, Kara.
That's so weird because it looks like it says great. I don't understand.
I don't know.
Okay, well maybe I'll try and fix it. I don't know. It doesn't even look like there's something to fix, so I don't know how to do this. But anyway, yeah. So I don't know what my final thought was going to be, but basically, like, I think it was really interesting the way that what for them were like foreign languages were used as like status or kind of like superficial ways. It was kind of a way to like communicate who was glamorous and who wasn't. But then when Olivia was using languages, it was like when she was using, obviously the book is in English, or when she was like taking those French passages, then it was used as like true love and heightened emotion. I don't know what's going on with my camera. I'm sorry, guys.
I don't know. I'm just glad we can hear you fine.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's better than nothing.
Yes. Yeah, okay, great. I don't even have anything to add at this point. You guys both said everything I felt about that. So, woo! Good job. Okay, and then the last, like, serious, I guess, I don't know, thing I wanted to talk about was, like, how did you feel about Mademoiselle Cara's plot line and like the entry in general? Because I did not expect it to go like full dark academia on us, and all of a sudden, like, there's been a murder.
As soon as they were like, oh, here's how you pour out her sleeping medicine, I'm like, you are marked for death.
On the wall.
Yeah.
Which is unfair because she objectively has the best character name in the whole book. So I got so excited.
She also yelled at Julie too.
I know, and because the bar is on the floor, as Taylor likes to remind us in these discussions, she's not a pedophile. So you're already, she's already the best teacher in this whole school.
You did it.
Or the best headmistress, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know to this day if it was like what was going on with that. I say to this day, I finished this book like 3 hours ago.
At this point in my life, I do not know.
I will say, I think it was pretty messed up that Julie took Olivia in there to see the body.
That was weird.
That was really bizarre. And then she's like, why do you look so sick? What's going on? What's wrong? And it's like, well,
there's a corpse here.
It's weird. I don't like it.
Yeah. Are we supposed to assume that maybe like Julie had something to do with it, or I forgot her name.
Yeah, I definitely wondered if Julie was involved somehow. Yeah.
I don't know. I did. And then like her reaction made me go like, okay, well maybe she didn't. But then like, what was the motivation otherwise? Like, it was very ambiguous, and it really came out of left field for me. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's like,
and like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just, like speaking of left field, it's like, yeah, there's like a scene at like the inquest, and I'm like, this is a very different book than what I thought we were getting. Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
I was going to say, this is getting us ready for our next pick, but like using my powers of deduction, I was sort of thinking like, okay, so they mentioned that she was the only one with the spare key. Mm-hmm. So, and she took
Yeah.
care of Kara a lot. And then, you know, she was going to lose everything or almost everything after like selling her share of the school and leaving. And Kara seems to be one of the only teachers. No, I think other teachers probably have an idea, but Kara seems to have confirmed that something is not right with Julie and that she should not be around the students.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's motive there, and maybe Julie like felt bad about like murdering her friend and was like, I'm just going to feel guilty about this forever in Canada.
Guilty in Canada, yeah.
Oh
But that was like, if she did do it, I think that might be motive enough for her to do it, especially since she was the one with access to like everything.
Yeah. And especially because like yeah,
that's the $1 million question.
That's what we're wondering. Especially because like the person who they were I can't remember her name, but like the person who gave her the medicine, who doesn't usually, we don't get a lot of information about her, but from the way she's reacting, she certainly seems to be telling the truth. So it's kind of like, yeah, Mademoiselle Julie is one of the only ones who makes sense for it to have happened. Oh, I thought you were talking about me, Julia. I was like, what?
I was
so confused.
I should have been Mademoiselle.
Yeah. So something else that like kind of bugged me about the way this whole plot point happened is like a lot of people's reactions seem to be like, oh no, Mademoiselle Kara, what a bitch. I guess she didn't deserve this though. It's like people really didn't like her, and it just kind of bugged me. Like, I mean, Olivia, to her credit, she does react in a way that like she does actually I don't know, seem to feel bad for like the way that she always thought of Mademoiselle Kara. But I just remember thinking that some of these characters were like pretty heartless, like because nobody, like almost nobody liked her, and they felt bad about it, but like they never really, like Mademoiselle Julie was like the fun one, and then like somebody is either like murdered or, you know, possibly overdosed for herself, and they're just kind of like, oh no, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys got that vibe, but
yeah. It was kind of like, I wasn't like too fond of Kara, but I didn't dislike her actively.
Yeah.
Like I didn't hate her. But
I think
I will say sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead. I thought you were. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I guess the only other person who could have done it was the German teacher.
I did wonder about her
afterwards, and also went with her to like get everything official and the will like notarized and stuff.
Yeah. She was the one who I actually thought was the strongest candidate for who did it. Like, I think Julie definitely has motive as well, but yeah, that Fraulein or Frau whoever was very sketchy. Yeah, it was like a very weird part of the book. I think the reason too that I felt more sympathy for Mademoiselle Kara is because I just felt really bad for her for like being nobody's favorite and like knowing it. Like that is so sad. And especially like when they were talking about, it's like, yeah, she just tries so hard to make people like her, and I'm like, okay. So I think I probably had maybe a little more sympathy for her than Olivia did, for example. But
yeah, she definitely didn't deserve. If she didn't deserve to go the way she did.
Right. Yeah. Agreed.
I might stop my camera and see if turning it back on helps, because I'm still getting weird things.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me try. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah. I had something to say, and then it literally just flew out of my mind the moment I opened my mouth.
Well, here we are. Okay, well, while you try to remember, and while Kara works on her camera, which maybe has improved a little, I can't quite tell yet. Maybe.
Oh,
it's like delaying less than it was.
Yeah, we get a little bit of movement.
I guess that's good.
I know. I'm going to remove you and pop you back in and see if that does anything. Please, sir? No? Nah. Okay, well, I selected a little passage that I liked, and I've turned it into a Mad Lib for us today.
Oh my god!
So, get ready. It's not very long. It's going to be like 5 words each.
Okay.
So we'll just go back and forth if you don't mind. So Taylor, can I please have a noun?
Ooh, truck.
Tara, can I have a body part?
Ear.
Oh, ear?
Ear.
Okay. Adjective?
Funny.
Noun?
Biscuit.
Okay. Body parts again.
Why does belly button? Belly button. I was like, I don't know any body parts other than ear now.
I love this already. Okay, adjective.
Glittery.
Glittery. Noun.
Fire.
Ooh. Adjective.
Green.
Noun.
Garage sale.
And one last noun, please.
Flower pot.
Beautiful. Okay, can't wait to read this. I'm just gonna get the context from where this was. So this is the scene. I think after no, not that one. It's like after the party, and she is waiting, thinking that perhaps Mademoiselle Julie is going to come to her room, and she's feeling very hopeful. So, a truck sang in my ear. Had I been funny before? Now, this is the best sentence. Now, biscuit flowed through my belly button. Why? Didn't I stop? I didn't stop to think why. I only knew that there, in the glittery fire, soon, something was coming to me. Some green garage sale, some flower pot that my whole being called for.
Oh my God.
Now biscuit flowed through my belly button. That's so good. Thank you both. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Julie.
Like a Reddit forum that's like completely like sentences that have never been said before.
Yeah, I was inspired because I used to have, I forget what it was called, but it was like Mad Libs, but they were all like from like classic novels. And I remember
I loved Mad Libs
with my friend. Yes, they're so good. When we were going to Spain in high school. And the iconic quote that to this day we will reference because it's so funny. It was like, wait, there were two. Okay, one was Oliver Twist, and he said, "Flippity gibbet, sir." I love that so much. But then the other one, God, I can't remember the other one now because I don't know what book it was, but there was like another really amazing one. But okay, thank you. Thank you. That's great. Okay. Okay, now we'll round it out with favorite quotes, as we always do. So if anyone has some ready to go, you can volunteer to go first, or if you need time, I am ready for this. I saved a butt ton of quotes, but I won't share them all.
Okay, yeah, I did mark a few. I don't think as many as you did, Julia, judging by the tabs, but all this was different, hopeless, a dreadful word, but with a kind of tonic in it. I would hug it to my heart. Yes, hopeless. It was that gave my passion dignity, that made it worthy of respect. No other love, no love of man and woman could ever be as disinterested as mine. It was I alone who loved. It was I alone whose love was an impossible fantasy.
Yes, I love that quote.
Yeah, like I think that's so yeah, like that idea of like when you have a great tragedy, it can make it easier to bear because it's like so glamorous and dramatic, you know?
Yeah, this is my tragedy and no other love compares to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the quote I was stuck between the one where she's asking Laura, like, oh, does your heart flutter and stuff? And Laura's like, no.
What are you talking about?
No. But the one I'm going with is when she is pining after Julie, and it says one of her friends asks her, like, hey, what's going on? Why are you so, forlorn? And she says, but I wasn't thinking. I was sometimes dreaming. The foolish dreams of adolescence, of how I should save her life at the cost of my own by some heroic deed, of how she would kiss me on my deathbed, of how I should kneel at hers and what her dying word would be, of how I should become famous by writing poems which no one would know were inspired by her, of how one day she would guess it, and so on and so on. And it just really put me back to when I was 16 and in high school. And I would imagine all of these scenarios, like, oh, maybe at prom he'll confess his feelings to me. Or one of my favorite activities as a middle schooler and high schooler was listening to love songs and just crying because I was pining so hard. So I was like, man, Olivia, you really got me there.
Yeah.
I know.
Very relatable.
There's literally, I think it's that same scene, Taylor. I absolutely went nuts. Like, so here's one page that has 1, 2, 3 tabs, and then you turn it and there's 3 on the back and then 2 on the next page. Because like everything she was saying, I was like, wow, whoa, like, yeah, it was a lot. But it all,
the writing is very pretty.
So yes, it is. And that's the hill dying on is, man, that writing's pretty.
Yeah. I have a couple more. I don't know if we want to share multiple. Sorry.
Well, here, I'll share this one. And
I was waiting for you to share yours.
If it's not one of yours, then feel free to share more because I love these quotes. Mine is actually almost the opposite of your first quote, ironically. How hard it is to kill hope. Time after time, one thinks one has trodden it down, stamped it to death. Time after time, like a noxious insect, it begins to stir again. It shivers back again into a faint, tremulous life. Once more, it worms its way into one's heart to instill its poison, to gnaw away at the solid, hard foundations of life and leave in their place the hollow phantom of illusion.
Oh.
Like, that's such a dark way to talk about hope, but I'm like, dang, that's true.
Yeah. One of the ones that I really like too, this is like near the very end, and she's thinking about why was Mademoiselle Julie so like cold to her when she said goodbye. Mm-hmm. Had she been disgusted? I put that dreadful thought away and began afresh. It was a scene she had dreaded. If I had gone into hysterics of tears, she might have broken down and wept too. But was I in the habit of having hysterics? It was unjust to think it. My tears were usually silent. And in any case, I thought angrily, she had no right to treat me with such cruelty, just to spare herself the inconvenience of my tears. She should have put up with them. Did she not owe me that, at least? I just really liked that one. Also, probably because I am a crier myself, but it's like, yeah, like when people act like you being so upset that you're crying is like an imposition on them instead of like an actual reaction to how you're feeling. I just like really liked that description because I read that and I'm like, yeah, that's the least she can do. I hate her, but yeah.
Agreed. I'll share one more if no one else minds.
Go for it.
I like this quote. It's from page 66, if that means anything to you. But it makes me think of like Moulin Rouge when, what do they say? It's like, you know, truth, beauty, like, what is it?
Truth, beauty, love?
Yeah, I feel like there's a fourth word, but like that. But it is solemnity, nobility, beauty, love. Were these then chimeras? No, 100 times no. I believed in them. With my whole soul, I believed in them. It was no waste of gift and graces to pursue them, but I must pursue them in a purer spirit, with more faith, with less selfishness. That's like when she's like getting into her studies, and I was like, ooh, I love that.
Yeah, the writing's so good. That's a good
Yeah.
quote.
Anything else, or are we done skis?
I think
Yeah.
we're done skis.
You
I
want to
think we're
share what we've got coming up? Technically this month, but
Yeah.
So, I believe we discussed like taking just a little like break for the rest of December in light of the holidays. But come January, our book for that month is going to be Sherlock Holmes and Witch Stories. I should have pulled them up ahead of time. So if you'll bear with me,
a study in Scarlet, a study in Scarlet.
A Study in Scarlet and A Scandal in Bohemia.
Yes.
And just so you know, A Scandal in Bohemia is when Irene Adler shows up, because I wanted to discuss her. But yeah, it should be really exciting.
I'm excited.
And that'll be on my channel. I figured that was sort of, one could guess that, but just in case.
Yay.
All right.
All right. Well, there we have it. Okay, well, thank you for watching. And Nana's excited about Irene. Is it just because it's your name or because you actually like her? That is my question. But yeah. Yeah, thank you for watching. I'm like, what do I say? I don't know. Bye. We'll see you all. And whenever we announce our next live show, it'll probably be the day of. So bye.
Bye.
Bye.